So welcome everyone to the Boston Office 365 user group. You could find us on our website as well as our newsletter to keep on top of our latest sessions. Also active on a variety of social media platforms. That being said, we have our three organizers here today. My name is Dimitri. I'm a partner at Turn Digital. We're joined with Mike Dixon, who's a senior consultant at Wellington Street Consulting. And we have Bill Gunning, who is a technical lead at ETOS here in Massachusetts. So with that being said, I will turn it over to Mike.
Yay, me. All right. So this month, we're doing something a little different. We're going to be doing a round table. We actually sent out a survey earlier on for you guys to respond to. If somebody could put a link to the survey in the chat, that way anybody who missed that earlier can actually feel free to fill it out now. So anybody who hasn't responded already, feel free to click the link in the chat and give us some ideas. So we got a request from somebody to hear about the different job roles that people in our group have. They're currently functioning as an IT project manager, but preferred their former role as a SharePoint BA, and I'm looking for opportunities. Titles seem to be all over the place now, and they're very interested in figuring out what kinds of titles people are carrying. So why don't we'll start with the three of us. My name's Mike Dixon, and I work as a senior consultant for Wellington Street Consulting.
And then I'm Bill Gunning. I work for the Commonwealth. I'm a technical lead, but I also work with numerous applications like OnBase, Atlassian, and SharePoint and Power BI.
Okay.
My name is Dimitri. I'm a partner / principal consultant at Turn Digital. My day-to-day is very much around helping clients with high-level solutions and aligning business problems to how technology can assist.
Okay. Anybody in the audience care to introduce themselves? Just name and job title is all we're looking for. And maybe mention if you've had a recent change in your job title. If your job title was related to SharePoint stuff or anything Office 365 related.
So this is Kathy Alexander. I'm at Bose Corporation. I'm currently a digital business analyst, and I was previously our global SharePoint administrator.
Digital business analyst.
Yeah, sometimes my boss calls me an engineering systems analyst. So, you know, I occasionally have, you know, who am I today?
Yeah.
Right. Interesting. All right. Well, thank you for sharing. Anybody else like to
jump in?
Sure.
Yes, Deb Walther. So for the past 3 years, I was a senior business analyst / consultant at a biotech company via an MSP. And then in December, they hired me full time, and I'm now the associate director of IT systems / business partners. A very long time. And basically, my job function, when I got there, I set up SharePoint. I work with a developer, Brad Patch. You know, I analyze what we need, what systems or processes we can start to automate or at least systematize. I help people develop their processes, write documents, do training. And then I also do integrations with other software. So, multifaceted. And validation.
Nice.
Anybody else?
Hi, Arthur Priver, not a very sexy title, president of a small company, and we are providing outsourced IT support for small businesses, keeping them all connected to their Microsoft 365 portals, among other activities. And just not super exciting, and we don't get any of the big operations.
Oh, come on, Arthur. You can give yourself any title you want.
Oh, sure.
You run the company.
Yeah, I
Okay.
file as president, so that's good enough. And I didn't even have to steal the last election.
There you go.
There you go.
All right.
Okay, I'm Heather Hedden. My role's a little different. I've also been a consultant, but more on the knowledge management side than the IT side, specifically in taxonomies. So I've consulted on designing taxonomies for SharePoint and the term store. But more recently, I joined a software company that develops taxonomy management software, and we have an integration with the SharePoint term store for auto tagging. So I submitted a question that was kind of more on the knowledge management side of things.
Yep. Okay.
Oh, my job title now is knowledge engineer.
Oh,
Knowledge
okay.
engineer.
Yeah.
That's cool. I like that
Yeah.
one.
Whenever you can keep engineering in a title, it sounds
Well,
good.
I that's a bit too technical for me. I don't think I'm really an engineer.
Yeah, it's interesting how people kind of identify with their job titles versus the role, and the absolute disconnect between what they do day to day and what their job title is, I find astonishing. So unless there's anybody else, I'd actually like to kind of throw this to Dimitri. Dimitri, I know you work with a lot of very large organizations. What have you seen? Because I think the root of what this question is getting at is the shift in job titles for IT roles for people that are doing M365 work. What kind of stuff have you seen? What seems to be on the out and what's on the in?
Just before that, I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Akash Somshekhar. I'm a SharePoint architect. I work with Cognizant. I'm starting to get my hands dirty in the Power Platform. Kind of struggling a little bit over there. But yeah, it's been fun learning the new ways of developing that.
Okay. And I'm sorry, what did you say the title was?
I'm a SharePoint architect.
SharePoint architect. See, that's a classic title.
Yep.
Like that's the titles that have been around forever. And I think we're seeing less and less SharePoint architects.
Yeah, I mean, it all boils down to the size of the organization. We work with clients where Office 365 is just an extension of the responsibility of the IT team. And people do what they can by using Google, using Microsoft blogs and support, and just keep the lights on. And those are typically the types of clients where we come in to help provide more governance strategy and more of a proactive services than just strictly, something's broken. But when you move into large organizations, we still see enterprise content management as being a role or a category of roles that continues to thrive. And many companies might have, SharePoint, Documentum, OpenText, Viva CRM, and other platforms where knowledge is stored and maintained. SharePoint tends to be a bigger one, just naturally because we typically work with more Microsoft-based shops. But within that, there's a whole lot of different roles. I mean, we see platform administrator roles that are usually more about setting things up and then stepping away when you get to the site collection level. And we see business analysts that partner with business stakeholders and help understand what they're looking for, write up the requirements, and then work with the SharePoint administrator or developer or consultant to help build that out. We're seeing more roles introduced on information management and knowledge management as a whole, where it's not so much just the technology, but more about more of a librarian function, where you're curating your company's knowledge. You're making sure that your record centers and your sources of authority have that proper metadata, have that proper retention cycles, and then everything else that's required within there. And then if we go more into the tech side of things, then yes, you have your traditional developer roles, which is traditionally a developer in SharePoint meant you were writing C# code. Today it might mean that you're building Power Apps or Power Automate flows, doing some of the low code, no code solutions. But then you also have your SPFX developers, or Azure Function App developers that are going and building full solutions and integrations on the platform. So within that realm, you have your citizen developers, you have your traditional developers, you have your architects, senior architects, etc., that are more focused on the technology than the use of the technology after it's deployed. And then you have consultants, which are kind of, they fit one or multiple of the things that I just discussed, just depending on their interest and background. So that's my take on that question.
Very cool.
But
how about you, Bill? What are you seeing about the state?
So in the state, we have a lot of, let's see what we have, like different agencies might have somebody that does the content or manage their website. So the web manager will take on more of the intranet or helping people with content. We have a lot of project managers, but nothing really has a SharePoint title in it.
Okay.
These are just the people who are working with it. We at the Commonwealth provide the site, and then we kind of like hand it off to the agency, who then takes over from the site collection level. So we're doing it from that point. My department does some training with different agencies on best practices, but really, it's the end of the day, it's for them to manage their site collection. You know what I mean? So we kind of like do what Dimitri mentioned. We hand it off once we get the site collection created.
Right.
At the site. So every agency is different. It falls to different people, different groups.
So what kinds of titles are you seeing for the people that you're working with directly at those agencies? Like the most technical of those people?
Like a lot of them, web info architect, web architect.
Web info architect. Okay.
Yeah, that's a good one. I actually like the person who did that one because the person's very good. But yeah, because a lot of people try to cover the, like we use a variety of tools. So they try to encompass not just SharePoint, publish to the public website, publish to the intranet, other tools that, GitHub that might publish out information. So yeah, and then accessibility. A lot of times I find it falls to the person in the agency that does accessibility, because I want to make sure the tool follows accessibility. Does it have the images in it? Does it have, the text, the alternate text and everything? So yeah.
Understood. Okay. What about CDOs? When I was back when I was a CIO for a company, people were starting to talk about how being a chief information officer is on its way out, and being a chief digital officer was going to be replacing that. I don't think that trend really hugely caught on, but I do see it on occasion. And then I see a lot of people online arguing about how those things might be different from one another.
Yeah, I mean, when we look at
Also,
chief digital
CIOs
officer.
Sorry.
Sorry, go ahead, Deb.
I said I see a lot of CIOs and CTOs, chief technical officers.
Yeah.
Yes. So I mean, typically the chief digital officer is not looking internally. They're typically looking outwards for the types of clients and services that they are delivering to their customer base, and figuring out how to make a better service, which typically relies on touching on a ton of internal systems, modernizing things, building middle layers. But their chief focus is typically customer focused. Chief information officer is usually focused on the knowledge and information within the organization. And the chief technology officer that one varies per company. We've seen CTO roles focus more on like the technical products that are being developed, if it's like a SaaS company or a technology company. If you look at other traditional companies, the CTO might fall under more of like system administration and kind of day-to-day maintenance, whereas the CIO would focus more on data and information management. So I don't think any of those roles are going away. I think they have very specific things that they're playing depending on the nature of the organization.
That's interesting, because the way I find it fascinating, the way that you defined CDO, because that's exactly how I had always defined CTO. I had always seen CTO as external facing for the technology that the company is providing, and CIO was internal facing for keeping the company's servers up and running and all of the fun stuff with that and the knowledge management.
Yeah, I mean, I think the key difference is that the CTO is typically focused on building technical solutions, right? Where the CDO is more focused on the user experience in driving that, and however you're delivering through your omni-channel to users, in kind of cutting the red tape or cutting across the red tape. Because as we all know, let's take the insurance industry, right? I'm sure there's still mainframes that are calculating risks and things along those lines, managing claims for some companies. So a CTO might be there and try to modernize the claim system, whereas a CDO might look and say, okay, how do we build a nice responsive mobile app, and how do we actually have a better engagement with our clients, while building some stopgap solutions along the way to deliver that.
Interesting. Okay, cool.
But
right.
But this isn't an experts panel. This is a roundtable. So I think the same question, we'd love to hear everyone else's thoughts on.
Yeah. Anybody else have any thoughts on that? Any trends that people are seeing? Okay. All right. Well, that's okay. I think we've beaten that one to death anyways.
Yep.
So I'm going to move on to our next question. And this one, somebody says, sync is giving us trouble. Do the links expire? I'm a SharePoint admin and I have had synced about 6 libraries over the last several months. When somebody else opened a ticket about their synced folders not actually being synced, I checked mine, only 1 was still synced. I double checked that they were indeed not connected and then deleted the links from the hard drive. This keeps happening. Some of it's user error, but most of it is not. Any ideas for making sync work reliably?
We've had the same issue with Solid. And what we've done is we've started moving people away from syncing from SharePoint to their hard drive to using the OneDrive sync. And partly because we've been starting to upgrade people's computers, and every time you do that, you got to redo all the links. If you sync it to your OneDrive, you don't. It stays.
What do you mean by sync it to your one?
It's one or the other. Yeah.
Yeah, it's one or the other, and I'm fortunate. I'm driving. I can't look at my computer at the moment, but yeah, there's an option to sync to OneDrive. And when you do that, it puts a link in your OneDrive.
Yeah.
I think they're referring to the
We're finding that to solve that issue. We do
that. It's a new sync, Mike, so it actually turns off the other sync. You can only sync a document library once, so best practice is to sync at the root of the library level. Unless there's only one folder you're ever going to need, then you could sync that one folder. But typically, everybody will move to the root and sync. Now, when you do a sync to the OneDrive, that's also your one sync, so your other one will get deactivated. I have noticed I've had to go to some of my libraries and resync them. I'll just go to SharePoint, hit the resync, and then they start working again. So whenever I run into a problem, I just go to the root of my document library and I sync. I like the SharePoint sync because I like the name of the SharePoint site, because I'm working with multiple sites and I'm working with files. So I got used to that, but I think it could just as easily get used to using the OneDrive. It's just how I'm currently configured.
Yeah, we've seen this a lot as well, and it really is confusing, right? Because there's a new add to OneDrive link that you see, and once you click that, to Bill's point, you can't have the same folder synced twice on the same machine. So if you were in a scenario where, let's say, you were syncing your document library already, or a folder in that document library, then you click Add to OneDrive Sync, and then if that takes precedence, you'll still see the old folder there, but it'll be disconnected and no longer syncing. So
which is confusing.
It's very confusing. So that's one chance of what's happening. The other thing is that if you're having unreliable sync, and let's say this was not the case, nobody's clicking add to shortcut. I would open up the OneDrive utility that you just the regular client and see if you have any sync errors. No, we've seen scenarios where people were trying to sync, hundreds of thousands of files, and it just takes some time for that backlog to clear. And until that backlog clears, you might have folders that appear to be synced that are not actually syncing. So definitely take a look at that. We had one developer that had, I forget which, it was a Node.js package that had quite literally like 20,000 files in a folder. And they're all like 1 kilobyte files. And it just completely ground the whole computer to a halt while it processed each of those files one by one. Of course, once it was done, things went back to normal, but for older machines, that could take some time.
It is problematic. I mean, I run into it. Users having issues. A lot of users just are not syncing. I've noticed in the Commonwealth, they're just going to the SharePoint site and dragging and dropping. And I hate to see that because I would rather have somebody work off a OneDrive sync because less copies of the files.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is actually new information to me. And I want to make sure that I have this clear and I understand what you guys are saying. So you're saying that if you go to a library and you click the add shortcut to OneDrive button, is that the button that we're talking about?
Yep.
So if you click on that and you were already syncing that, that'll disable the previous sync?
Usually it doesn't let you. It tells you that you're already syncing the library. Then you have to go in and disable the sync before you can allow the sync in OneDrive. At least that's been my experience.
Yeah. Or the other thing is, like, let's say you're syncing a subfolder in a library, and then you go to sync the document library root. It'll sync the entire thing minus that one folder that you've already been syncing separately.
That's confusing.
That's really
I wish they would deprecate that and make a symbolic link there or something. But
is there a way to disable one or the other?
I think there is a tenant setting, right, Dimitri? I know we were looking into that.
Not that I'm aware of, but
because I mean, honestly,
I'd be happy to be proven wrong.
The reason that I didn't know that this was happening is I saw this new feature pop in, and I just ignored it, and silly me, I took it for its word, and I thought it was just going to add a shortcut to OneDrive. I didn't realize that meant that it was also doing a sync through to the sync client of OneDrive. Mm-hmm. See, this is the problem with Microsoft using the term OneDrive to mean 14 different freaking things. And it drives me crazy.
The hardest part is when somebody does a folder.
When you sync to SharePoint, it tells you you're syncing to OneDrive. It's very confusing.
Right, and I think one of the things that they should do is just rename the sync client to just, 365 downloader or something.
Just be Explorer Sync, something.
Yeah, something. Just rename the sync client, and that way you can say the 365 sync client is for SharePoint and OneDrive. And that would be much cleaner to discuss and to teach.
And once you see the sync, which is confusing to some of my clients, so you go into the Windows Explorer, the File Explorer, and you see a OneDrive there. And of course, sometimes they link it twice, once with personal and once with business, and they can't find things. But is there any way around that, or that's what we're talking about, I guess?
So they can, if they have the latest version of the sync client, they can actually simultaneously sync the what I refer to as the blue cloud or the white cloud at the same time. And the reason I call them that is because they literally give you the different icons on your system tray. And the personal ones are white and the business ones are blue.
Yeah. Is there a separate client, or what I do is I just have people go to the portal. No, they just go to the portal and say to sync to the team site, and then they never have to go there again. They just look in the File Explorer.
Right. Yeah, no, there was a consolidation. There's only one sync client now, which is, at least there's that. And that one sync client will support multiple personal and multiple business accounts at the same time, which is actually really nice. Like, I'm looking at my status bar right now, and I have 1 white cloud and 3 blue because of all the client work that I'm doing.
And when Mike's referring to new client, pretty much any client that you might have updated in the last year or so will support that.
Yeah.
It's relatively new.
That's true. Yes.
But hey, one more thing to toss in here. So Microsoft has this OneDrive sync report dashboard that's in public preview at the moment. I'm going to put a link to it in the chat window.
That's a good
So this will give you the ability, if you opt into it, to be able to see which of your users across your organization are having OneDrive issues, and then allow you to be more proactive with that as opposed to going back and getting tickets and trying to help them that way.
That's very nice of them. I like that. I like enabling proactive. That's great.
Yeah. I mean, is there a way that a user could do it themselves? I wish, like, I think empowering the end user is better.
I mean, if a user wants to do it themselves, I mean, if they just click on the OneDrive icon, they'll get the sync errors that they have.
Right.
Yeah.
But this admin dashboard will tell you if there's like known folder redirections that have not been configured or have errors, or if you have, it'll show you the sync version that your users have installed. If someone's running an older version, that could be a flag to push a newer build out. So it's still in preview. It doesn't work. Like, it works for some of our clients. It completely doesn't work at all for other clients. So I'm not going to say this is ready. But for the clients where it does work, it's pretty cool.
Hey, it's a motion in the right direction. I like it.
Absolutely.
Actually checking out my dev tenants now.
Awesome. All right. Well, that's cool. I think we definitely answered that question, and I learned something too. Crazy.
I tell you, that is the first thing I do when I train somebody on a SharePoint site is syncing. I find it's just so important. So I start with it and I end the call with it. You know, I just feel like it warrants two times. You know.
Oh, I completely agree. Yeah. Hang on. Was there something else?
I still haven't decided over the OneDrive sync or the SharePoint sync. So I've been debating them. I know we're looking into it if we can disable one, because in the Commonwealth, we hate to have 2 ways of doing something. We'd rather train for one. So I know they're looking into turning off the OneDrive sync or deciding they just go to that.
I've been working with my regulatory people because they're the ones that have the most issues with SharePoint at 11 o'clock at night. And it was actually a reg ops person who pointed out the OneDrive sync to me. And we're finding we're actually getting much better performance. They're having fewer saving issues with some of the documents using the OneDrive sync versus the SharePoint sync. So, yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, ever since I'll say new in air quotes for Dimitri, the new sync client came out, I've actually found that the latest sync client has been really, really helpful. Ever since they did that consolidation of the all of the systems, you know, once you move away from groove.exe, life has been much, much better and smoother. And also, the other thing that I really love about it is files on demand. That's the other thing that really took a large sting out of this. So that way people can sync that stuff down, and as long as they don't do something stupid, they won't actually crash their machine with out of disk space errors. Because prior to that, we had people who were like, I'm all connected to SharePoint, and now my laptop's out of drive space. It's like, you probably don't need to sync everything. But
well, what's interesting for us, we actually sync everybody's hard drive to OneDrive. So in a way, you're almost like double syncing.
Yep. Okay, so next question. This person asked the question about what would you like to learn in this session. They said Power BI and Power Automate and ideas for improving user friendliness in these apps and SharePoint. Ideas for improving user friendliness. Well, I'm all on board with that. there should always be improvements to user friendliness. And luckily, she is here with us now.
Yes, hello.
Would you like to elaborate on that for us, Catherine?
Yeah, sure. I could even turn it around a little bit.
Sure.
I'm always interested in when people come up against a usability or a user friendliness issue, what they are, and trying to figure out what to do about it. We've had some things like the tooltip within in Power Automate, and you're asking your user to fill in a few bits of information, and in that cell you can put in a tooltip in light gray text. And so I put in things like from cell A1, and it is almost 100% overlooked. I don't know whether it's the gray text or what. Another one we had recently was helpfully put in white text on a dark gray background, right click to drill through in Power BI. And again, I think I had about 99% nobody saw it. Everybody thought it was a subtitle, I'm told, and looked over it. So I'm always interested in hearing what people come up against, because I figure I only hear about a portion of what my users come up against.
Okay. So this is specifically in Power Apps, right?
And Power BI and SharePoint, for that matter.
Okay.
Yeah,
So-
I mean, one thing I would say is that most people aren't really trained on user experience design, or really come from that eye for presenting data in a very user-friendly way. So that causes, your typical, the barrier has been really lowered to go and build, a Power App or a Power BI dashboard. Just about anybody can do it themselves these days, which doesn't mean that they're going to look good, right? I mean, I think, take any, stereotypical developer and ask them to go build a slick-looking website, and I'm sure they'll build any functionality that you're looking for, but unless they come from that UX background, it might look a bit choppy. So I think for a lot of our clients, we've helped establish like centers of excellence, or in many cases they might have internal resources available that could help more with the softer side of things. And in doing so, just having a UX person look here and say, hey, it would be easier if you organized the data this way, if you added a grouping there, if you added some more white space between these sections, if you collapse these fields that are rarely used, and really take a bit of guidance around that. I don't think there's been a whole lot of guidance published by Microsoft around best practices for UX, especially in these platforms. But typically we've seen it be successful when pairing a UX person for a small amount of time with a given app or dashboard to assist there.
Mm-hmm.
And I would just add to that from the Power Apps side. What I've done for that is I've actually built a component specifically for error messages, and I set it up so that I can feed in variables into the error message, like what the helper text is for the error, and sometimes even the ability to link directly to it. But when I have that error message pop up, it's literally, they cannot miss it, because what happens is when it's triggered, it opens a div or a new box that actually covers the entire screen, grays out most of it, and then has a little window in the center of it that displays the message and gives them specific instructions as to maybe why it failed or what the format is that we're looking for a particular field.
That's pretty tricky. Block it so they can't get past the, the information.
Yeah. So now to do that, there's a lot of validation code that you have to write on all of your submit processes. So it's it's not the first thing that goes into my applications, I can tell you that. My first iterations are without guardrails. and then as I gather feedback on it, you know, so we run an agile shop, so we're really big on rapid prototyping and just gathering as much feedback as possible. And then one of the things I think that makes our shop a little bit different is we actually look at that feedback and review it and try to incorporate changes based on that. And sometimes it's changes to the application itself. More frequently than not, it's changes to the curriculum for training in use of the app. But sometimes it actually leads to changes in the app itself. So, I mean, any time where I see multiple issues in the same thing, I just start to think like, well, it's probably not the user then.
Yeah, when you get the same question 3 or more times, it's time to do something about it.
I think user design just takes time, and developers can be busy just trying to get everything working, and it almost needs like a meeting or two, you know, like, hey, this report looks great. What can we do to bring some color to it? Like I like to on Power BI, if I can, you know, have my filter boxes in different colors that go along with some of the data, or anytime I can add color or highlight or, you know, group things together. Yeah. And I think they warrant their own meetings.
Group things together is super, super helpful.
But I think it's just, you know, it's the next layer. Okay, once you get it working, technically working, now let's get into the design and the color. And I think it just having a conversation, starting that conversation will help open the door to user interface. And hi, Chrissy, I saw you on the call.
Yeah, and I completely agree with what Bill said there.
Hey, Bill.
Hey.
Hey, Mike. Hey, Dimitri. Sorry, I saw the reference from Russell, Power BI user training in the chat. So I figured, oh, Power BI. That's music to my ears. I can help.
Nice.
So we're talking about how just Power BI reports are plain and boring, and now like how do you make them look better, and then user interface and design. And I think a lot of time developers stop at getting the data there. And I think it's more conversations to get it to look good.
Right. There's a lot of UI UX perspective also to Power BI. And from the recent Build conference, oh my Lord.
Oh yeah.
There have been so many updates to Power BI, including the way that you can actually embed a Power BI report in PowerPoint. So then that way you can share it with others, and they'll be able to see it alive, report within PowerPoint. It's like, yeah, it blows the mind.
Are they able to interact with the report there?
Of the poll that I just put in.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So the question was,
Mike, that's a loaded question. There's a lot of stuff on Build that happened. Oh my God. Oh God.
Right,
so before we jump to the poll, though, I think Russell had a question for Chrissy. Yeah. Russell, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was curious. I've never seen that before. Are users able to interact with the report in Power BI? I mean, if you embed it in PowerPoint?
Well, that's the latest feature that, first you have to enable it within, like if you have a PowerPoint report, right? You enable the Power BI embed option in PowerPoint, right? You have that. And then on Power BI, you know how for each and every report, you get the URL for that particular report, right? You can take that URL, or it could even be the dashboard too. That's fine too. Whether it's the report or dashboard, whatever you want to incorporate into your PowerPoint, you take that URL and then you go back to your slide deck in PowerPoint and you embed that. And bing, bang, boom, it's there. Now that's something that it's still, it's still being pushed out. So I guess depending upon when it hits your tenant and everything like that, you may or may not see it in PowerPoint, but you should be able to see the option. Let me see if I open up the PowerPoint.
Does the PowerPoint user need to be licensed for Power BI?
Most likely.
You need some type of license. So either
unless you have premium capacity.
Right.
Is it the person who creates it having the license, or I mean, let's say you're doing a Power BI for an external PowerPoint presentation and you're putting it on your website? Would an end user, then a guest user, be able to click in?
Okay, if you're sharing out your deck, so for example, if you're presenting your PowerPoint with others, then you don't really need to enable the permissions, because you'll be able to interact and demonstrate the report within your slide deck. Now, Deb, you did present a very good question, and that's of course was also my question during build when I presented it as well, but it also goes back to the default permissions issues. So if you're taking that Power Deck and then sharing out with others, those permissions then still apply. So then the one that is consuming the data within that slide deck does either have to be, if they're a Power BI Pro, then they're fine. Or if they're not Power BI Pro, they need to at least you need to at least enable them as either a PPU, or if they do have the Cadillac of the premium capacity. But yes, all those permission issues do apply if you're sharing out the share deck. But if you're presenting the presentation, then all that interaction is there within the PowerPoint, if that makes sense.
Yeah, if you're the one sharing, you should have the one with the permission and the license.
Yeah.
Well, again, I'm thinking if you're presenting on a website, no, then they wouldn't be able to drill down.
Well,
Yeah,
no,
I mean, I think
because I'm on my computer, it's working off my license. That would make sense. But if
if you're presenting on a website, you're sharing it out. That's not presenting on a website.
Let's say I'm going to use the new Power Page, and I'm going to put my PowerPoint presentation on a Power Page, and that I can externally share to anonymous users. They would not be able to drill down, it sounds like.
Well, Power Pages is also the other exciting new feature I was excited about from Bill, and that's also recent, and that's not to be confused with the Power Portals. Two different things.
The Power what?
The Power Portals, because
Portals. I haven't heard of that one yet.
Yeah, there's Portals and there's Power Pages, and Pages is almost like the evolution of the Portals, but it's still two different things. They are actually still, you could still work in Portals and you could still work in Power Pages. It's not like Power Pages is replacing Portals. No, it's like let's just say that eventually Portals will evolve into Power Pages, but at the time they still coexist. Yeah.
Yeah, that's like a new thing from the Power Apps team. They came out with this Power Pages, and it's supposed to be like for external users or something.
It's almost like it's allowing us to use this product now to basically create intranets again, or internets again.
Internets, yeah. I'm afraid of that thing.
Yeah. But it's actually a Power BI app, right?
It's actually, rather than internet, I'm thinking it's actually more extranets, not internets, because internet is SharePoint.
Yes.
So Power Pages.
No, intranet. Intranet would be SharePoint. Internet allows you to go external.
Exactly, but Power Pages would be extranet.
Yep.
Outside of your organization.
Not necessarily, because you can do anonymous, which would make it internet.
Well, that's true.
Exactly.
That is true.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, Chrissy, do you have any documentation or official announcement that you can point us to about that? Because what you're saying about the difference between Power Apps Portals and Power Pages is very different than what I had heard. Microsoft reps, which was that Power Pages was a direct evolution and replacement for Power Apps Portals.
Okay, now, Mike, well, you're saying, yes, it's an evolution, but it's not a replacement. And this is actually coming from There was an excellent YouTube presentation that Reza, I'm gonna butcher his last
Oh,
name.
I know Reza. Yeah,
That
that's great.
okay. He hosted one of the guys from Microsoft shortly after Build, and it was a really good session. And there's been still quite a bit. Let me see if I could try to pull it up because it's been
Sure.
hold on. I know he put it on his YouTube page. So let me just log into there, and I'll put it in the chat. But
Yeah, so
but
I'm sharing my screen here. So I think Chrissy's right. So this is an evolution of Power Apps Portal.
yeah.
And then if we go into licensing, my understanding is that this is following the same pricing model that Power Apps Portal was following, where for internal users, you license it with your Power Apps per user or per app plan. And for external users, depending if they're authenticated or not, there are different prices per month based on how many logins or page views
Right.
you have.
Exactly. Yeah. Thanks, Dimitri. Yeah, because that's why they wanted to emphasize. Now it's still fluid because it's still in public preview. So they're still working on the whole licensing. Right now, it's still like you could sign up for the trial and things and how they could, work it out. It's not going to be anything now for sure. It's not something it's not going to be included with any of the tiers. Whether that's the E5 from M365 or E5 from O365. No. It will be an add-on.
You don't just get anonymous portals for free? Game changer.
But
no, I don't think it's free. So the anonymous here is based on page views, right? So 100,000 page views for $100.
I'm trying to see. I think I just want to double check that I'm pulling up the right. Oh shoot! Sorry. I hate when the YouTube automatically plays. Let's see. I want to make sure because they hosted.
Not bad. 100,000 views for $100 is not bad at all.
Oh yeah, it's actually pretty good. But this was a fabulous because Ressa did that shortly. It was actually Ressa and Daniel. Daniel Christian, and Daniel Christian is like a whiz on Power Apps, right? They're the ones that they were hosts, and they hosted. Shoot, I forgot his name. Oh yeah, here it is. Dileep Singh, and he's a principal program manager at Microsoft, and he lead talking about the Power Pages. It was a really good session, and I'll pull up now. I'm actually now going to copy. I'll put the link in the chat, and that may actually help. And I thought it was a really, really good session. There you go. I just put it in the chat.
Awesome. Thank you, Chrissy.
You're welcome, but that's good. But I actually even started to play
the
around
clarification.
with it.
These days right after build sessions are always a little chaotic as far as information flow.
Yeah. Well, and the funny thing, you don't expect to have so much of the Power BI content updates through Build because Build is more dev stuff, which I dabble a little bit in dev, but to be truthful, I'm not really a true dev. I could understand the code. I may understand what it is, but I dabble. But and that's what Build is, right? And everything. But there was so much Power BI content updates with at Build that it was blowing my mind. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, but that's a Power Page. But yeah, if you all could get a chance to actually just watch that YouTube video, it's actually really good. Both Retsa and Daniel did well hosting it, hosting Delete, talking about all of the Power Pages, especially since it was still really fresh off the pages because it's still new. It's still in public preview, and people were asking about licensing, and really, licensing is still a big question. That probably won't come until after the preview period because they want to test the waters.
They want to get us all hooked on it.
Yeah, exactly. Hook, line, and sinker. They're getting
Hooked on phonics.
the fishing line out.
Chris, I probably read that they were planning on launching this sometime in August or September. Am I wrong there?
That's still rumors. Again, it's public preview, so it's fluid. Like with really any Microsoft development, everything's fluid. It all depends. Yeah.
Because it's a Microsoft release date. That is solid. You can bet on it.
Right. Oh, and of course, I'm sorry for coming in late, but did we all hold a memorial for yesterday's IE?
No.
I did not.
Oh, okay. No, because wasn't yesterday is when it was IE's last day?
Something like that, yeah.
Yep, now we can no longer write VB script directly in the browser.
I don't feel as bad about IE as I did about InfoPath.
Yeah, that's true. All right. Well, circling it back around, Catherine, does that answer your questions? Are there any areas that we should delve into that were kind of skipped over there?
Yeah, I think good for now. And I've gotten distracted by the chat, so, I've moved on. And actually, the conversation that we're having in the chat after we get through all the questions that were submitted, it might be interesting to do that live a little bit.
All right, so I'm going to move on to the next question then. And this one is from Heather. And Heather asks for recommendations, strategies, and techniques for enterprise knowledge base information management, findability, and retrieval. Well, good. I thought you guys were going to ask something easy. Jesus. Yeah, that's kind of the whole thing, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know whether it should be limited to SharePoint or beyond to other apps, which maybe is.
Yeah, no, there's this one app that you can download, and it just takes care of all of that for you. No, that's not true.
Yeah.
That's
I mean, Heather, I think the natural solution is Viva Topics.
Okay.
So it's a new product that was just generally available.
Yeah, I've heard of it.
Fall.
So, I was wondering if it was thought that could fit that role or not.
Yeah. So basically, you can either load a set of topics or it'll recommend topics that you can improve, and it'll build a Wikipedia-like page based on that information that's all security trimmed. And then if somebody that has a license does any search across Office 365, and there's a match to a topic or a synonym of the topic, they'll see that as one of the first results, like what Visual Best Bets used to be back in the old SharePoint days.
Best bets.
So in addition to doing it from search, coming this summer, if somebody mentions, like, let's say a topic, like, a project name or something in a Teams chat window or an email, it'll become like an adaptive card that you can hover over, and it'll give you a little bit of insight in terms of what that project's about, who the key experts are, and then you can click into that to go into that corresponding Viva Topics page.
Okay. Have any of you been using Viva Topics yet, or it's still?
Yep. We've actually been a launch partner with Microsoft Viva, so we've been playing with it for a long time before it became public. But Heather, is your organization a Microsoft partner?
No. Well, let's see. We partner with a company that might be, because you had said we've developed this integration, but we are not directly.
Okay.
My company's kind of small. We've got it's 70 employees, and we're based in Vienna, Austria, and I'm the only one in the U.S.
Okay. Well, it's free to become a Microsoft partner.
Mm-hmm.
And if you do become a Microsoft partner, they have a demos environment where you can request a demo tenant that they can preload with content. And then one of those options for demo tenants includes a Viva demo tenant. So you can, they're valid for 90 days, and you can't share them with actual end clients, but you get a chance to go in there and play with the technology in a sandbox.
Yeah, okay. We should maybe consider that. Thanks. But I mean, I didn't even name my employer. It's called Semantic Web Company, and our product is called Pool Party. Kind of funny name.
And what does Pool Party do?
It does taxonomy and ontology management, and auto tagging with NLP and some classification algorithms, which I know Viva Topics also has some auto classification too.
So I think, are you familiar with BA Insights or?
Yeah, I am. So I mean, it's an I don't know if other people in my company know much about that. I mean, I know BA Insights is based in Boston, and I've met employees of that company. So that, focuses on the auto classification or auto tagging, and also has some taxonomy management, whereas Pool Party is more heavy on the taxonomy and ontology management. That's where they focus, and so not quite as strong in the auto categorization, in my opinion. But so I don't know. We're not exactly a direct competitor with BA Insights, but it overlaps.
Gotcha.
Okay, thanks. And if anyone else want to say something.
And just a little bit to elaborate on what Dimitri was talking about there. There's a big difference between a demo tenant that he mentioned that you need to be a Microsoft partner for, and a dev tenant, which anybody can get and sign up for. And that is that the demo tenants have the content and cannot be shared.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for clarifying that.
Yeah.
And Mike, I think you're referring to the dev program, the link that I posted in the chat. That one.
Yes, I didn't see that link, but yes.
No worries.
Yeah,
and that's
I'm
free.
just reading through
Anyone
that link.
can use that. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just looking through that, Chris. Yeah, I don't think that one includes the Viva, at least not yet.
No, I don't think so.
Can someone post a link where I would get a demo tenant?
Sure, it's demos.microsoft.com. I'll paste that here. But so as long as your username is associated with a Microsoft partner, you should be able to log in and get to that.
Yeah, so dev tenants are kind of perpetual. As long as you use them, they'll kind of auto renew. Demo tenants have a very strict 90-day deadline. So after 90 days, that tenant just goes away. The good news is you can sign up for another one at the end of that 90 days. And last I checked, and Dimitri, correct me if I'm wrong, the last I checked, you could maintain 6 of them at a given time. Not sure if that's the case anymore or not, but
to be honest, that Microsoft partner, so the Microsoft partner sites in general don't get the same performance as the commercial sites. Yes. So I've seen it be a little bit finicky sometimes. Generally, I mean, it's a full tenant, right? So you can have as many sites as you want and everything else. So I usually maintain one demo environment at a time just to keep my sanity. But yeah, I believe you can have additional ones.
Yeah, we did a few at a time just because you couldn't have overlapping different options in some of them. We had a couple of demo tenants that were running at the same time to represent different industries. So, but yeah, I also found, and again, I haven't used it in a while, but the portal that you use for managing your tenants would frequently be down or display a message saying we're not provisioning demo tenants at this time. But hopefully they're beyond that now. Okay. So our next question is from Akesh. And Akesh would like to know, how mature is the Power Platform development and release processes?
Well, Akash, I think it depends what hat you're wearing. If you're used to source management and development pipelines, continuous integration, it's not there yet. But that being said, you can certainly package up your Power Apps or your Power Automate flows into zip files and manage that as you would essentially external libraries in your source code management. So it's not quite that, you make a change in dev, it gets approved, and then you push a button, it gets into UAT, push a button, it gets into prod. It's not there yet. To be honest, I don't know if the APIs even exist if you wanted to hand build a custom release management process there. But given the fact that you could package things as zip files and just reconnect the connections afterwards, you can establish a process that'll let you roll back if there's any problems that arise.
Okay, I heard there is some difference in the way the tools the tools available for a standard SharePoint backend kind of system compared to a Dataverse backend system. So I heard Dataverse has a lot more robust ALM capabilities. I think they're kind of integrating with GitHub and things like that. I haven't worked with Dataverse yet, so I'm not sure how strong those tools are for release.
Yeah, so I think you're comparing model-driven Power Apps versus Canvas-driven Power Apps. So Canvas-driven Power App is basically, you get a data source, you have a clean slate, you choose which fields to add on, and you have a lot of flexibility. And provided that your data sources are within Office 365, like a SharePoint list, there's no additional license cost beyond your, E1, E3s, and so forth. The other side is the model-driven apps, which you can leverage the Dataverse, you could leverage a SQL database. And in those scenarios, it's intended more to say, hey, we have this really mature data model that we're using in whatever scenarios. And now we just want to build an easy to use, user-friendly mobile interface on top of it. And in that case, you're basically bound to that data model. The Power Apps will take a lot of that control away from you, but in turn, give you the ability to have a user interface on a data set. So in both cases, you're going to follow a similar type of ALM, which is going to be, dealing with zip files. The thing that you might be also you might have heard of is the enterprise equivalent of Power Automate flows. So Power Automate flows are really more in that end user space that are easy to build, but there's no great ALM. So whoever builds a flow leaves the organization and doesn't assign a second owner, it could be a bit painful to do anything with it. So in those scenarios, there's the Azure equivalent of that called Azure Function Apps. Sorry, Azure Logic Apps.
Logic Apps.
So Azure Logic Apps use the same underlying workflow engine as Flow, but it's got a ton more ALM capabilities around it. And instead of just charging, for free up to a certain number of licenses like flows do, they actually charge you a few cents every time action is executed. If you have a 100-step flow, that's 100 actions, then you get charged, $1 every time it runs. But you get a lot more enterprise capabilities around that. So anytime you're building something that is not really specific to one SharePoint site, or if you're deeming it to be like an application, I think the Logic apps make a ton more sense.
Cool, thanks. That really helps.
Yep. Russell says Logic Apps do not include the approvals from Flow. Russell, so it's been a while since I've last been hands-on with it, but my understanding was that there was a parity between all of the actions available in both environments. Can you speak a little bit more to what you see missing there?
Yeah, when you we were looking to do this, I was all for going into Logic Apps because of this issue. But in Flow, you can start an approval, and you would start an approval with these people. That action did not exist in Logic Apps. This was about a year ago I looked. So if you're saying you think there's parity, I'll have to go and double check. But those actions, from what I understand, aren't there.
Let me paste something in the chat window here. And again, I haven't done this myself. It's probably been a couple of years since I last dabbled in Logic Apps myself. But take a look at this tutorial that Microsoft has. I think they brought things up to feature parity.
All right, I'll take a look. Thanks for that.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And just talking, sorry, one last thing was talking about Power Apps. What's with the delegation limit? Is there chances of Microsoft resolving the 2,000 item limit for delegation and things like that? Because I can't do data related calculations, comparisons, and things like that in Power Apps.
So there are workarounds for that where you can basically set up calls that do batches of data set calls, and then you can assemble those batches into collections that run local to the Power App. And you'll actually see a significant performance increase by setting it up that way as well.
Yeah, and Akash, and kind of realize too, right? This is designed as a low-code, no-code platform. So if you're starting to hit up against some of those thresholds that Microsoft is putting in place, it might be a good idea just to take a step back and evaluate if this is really the right platform for your needs. Because we've seen, Power Apps or flows that process a lot of data just end up being super slow and just, provide a bad user experience because they're doing a lot of the stuff in memory, or they're trying to pull data in timeouts and things like that. So, I think anytime you're coming close to those limits, it might be a good idea just to reevaluate the platform.
Agreed. But there are some fun tips and tricks to get around that as well. If your evaluation ends up going that way.
Yeah, I eventually did a REST API call, calling the SharePoint REST API, and did it, and it worked.
Yeah, and also to clarify on something that Dimitri was talking about earlier, he's absolutely right that if you go with the model-driven apps, those require a CDS connection on the back end. In Canvas apps, you have the option of using CDS. So you can use CDS to power your, to be your primary data store and database for Canvas Power Apps. And I believe that will get you around that 2,000 record limit as well, because I believe that that's a SharePoint only limitation and not a CDS limitation. I'm not 100% sure on that, but
yeah, that's true, because that's basically a database. But then obviously you have the Dataverse licensing that comes in.
Yes,
that's the additional piece. Yeah.
Yep.
We're trying to work with a standard E3 license model and trying to keep the costs. It's like trying to do InfoPath. You don't need additional license for InfoPath.
I'm reluctant to recommend this, but one of the ways that you can work around that is Dataverse for Teams. So if it matches the work that you're going for, you can associate a Dataverse for Teams app with that, and that gets you a free
Dataverse
license for Dataverse. I like to think of that as Dataverse Express. That's what we call that internally, and it's just to remind ourselves that it's not the same CDS that you would get in the primary thing. It does have some smaller limitations, but its limitations are far greater than SharePoint. So it's a possibility of looking at that. And also it's now possible to share a Dataverse for Teams Canvas app outside of that particular team. So there's some weird boundaries and workarounds that they've put in place, and all of this is legit. Like, this is how Microsoft says that you can use it. So
yeah, I think it's important
very
to
interesting.
keep in mind the Power Platform, like Power Apps, regular CDS, really has come out of Dynamics 365.
Mhm.
So if you look at how things are licensed, if you're a D365 shop, your D365 licenses will already get you additional database capacity for Dataverse for every user that you have. And it'll get you around a lot of these licensing limitations that we're seeing as Office 365 primary users. So if you are in D365, a lot of these things just simply go away because you're covered by it.
Is it more economical for people to license for Dynamics than it would be for CDS directly if they're not using Dynamics? Probably not. Dynamics is pretty expensive, isn't it?
I mean, any ERP is going to be pretty expensive.
Yeah. I was just thinking that, and right after I asked the question, I remembered, like, oh yeah, I remember what Dynamics pricing was.
Well,
Yeah.
unless if you become a Microsoft partner, customer engagement is included in the action pack.
Yeah, that's a slippery slope, though, and you're looking at potential license violations for that, though. Because the stuff for action packs is supposed to be internal use only. So I'm not saying that it won't work, just, you know.
They still have the action pack?
Might be frowned upon.
Oh, yeah.
Action Pack's
Action
still
pack
around.
is still available. Yeah.
Action Pack is great.
Oh, actually, especially if you're also a dev, it includes the Visual Studio licenses too. So, yeah.
It gets you.
What
so
action pack is that you guys are talking about? The Power BI action pack?
No,
No.
action pack under if you go to partner.microsoft.com and you just log in, you'll see the option that you could subscribe to action pack. I believe it's $450, $500, I think.
470,
Like,
475 a year.
forgive me for correct me on the exact price, but it's in that range.
I'm not a partner. Never mind.
Oh, okay.
I mean,
And
Microsoft is making some pretty significant changes to their partner program this summer, but I believe today you can sign up to be a partner with absolutely no qualifications.
If you could send me a link to that, I'm all on board, man. Thanks.
Yeah, so
Okay.
I was just gonna elaborate. Their lowest partner level is just called registered partner, and that's always had almost no requirements whatsoever. It's like literally, here, watch this YouTube video, and then boom, check this box. Okay, now you can say that you're a Microsoft registered partner. So there's no requirements for sales of Microsoft products or anything like that. You get extra goodies if you do that, and then you could become a silver and gold partner. But just as a registered partner, you will qualify to buy the Microsoft Action subscription, and that gets you all of the goodies that Dimitri is sharing with us now.
Yeah, and Chrissy's right. It's $475.
Yep.
And with that, you get $100 a month Azure grant credits. You get 3 Visual Studio subscriptions, Azure AD Basic, which is no longer a valid SKU, but it gets you some of that MFA functionality. You get some Calvin licenses for just internal use. Chrissy's point, you get 5 licenses of customer engagement. You get 5 licenses of Office 365 E3 and EMS. So it's worthwhile having this for sure.
It's definitely worthwhile.
Oh,
I mean, when we last did the math on it, and this was us not calculating all of the licenses in there, but just the ones that we were going to use at Wellington Street Consulting. It was providing for us what would have otherwise been around $6,000 worth of licensing for $475 instead.
And what they've actually also
Very
changed,
no-brainer.
changed up in the partner program are the competencies. Like what used to be competencies, like even last year, has all been like revised.
All gone.
So those silver and gold partnership qualifications are going to be completely revamped, I believe in October of this year. So basically, whenever your gold or silver renews after October of this year, you'll have to meet the new qualifications, which
Sure.
Many people in the MSP forums are concerned about being able to qualify, because previously most of them were tied to certifications. Some of them were tied to how much spend you're reselling in certain areas. The new ones have another matrix of what you need to qualify for, but they're definitely putting a heavier emphasis on doing more to show that you're actually qualified.
Sure. As soon as Wellington Street qualified for gold partnership, they moved the guidelines. You see how it is.
Yeah. For some of the gold ones now, you need to have like 20 plus people certified in specific areas, and another 5 or 10 on the expert level certifications.
And that makes sense, because honestly, the bars were set pretty low. There are a lot of Microsoft Gold partners out there.
Yep.
There's a bare minimum of at least 20 just right here in Waltham.
I think there's 40,000 Microsoft partners worldwide. Well, let's keep this rolling. What's the next topic, Mike? Or next question?
Next topic. Next topic. So issues developing a solution, Power Apps and Automate on SharePoint backend. Had issues with solutions, versioning, and solutions.
That was the same question I asked. So that's kind of covered in the previous conversation. Thanks, Mike.
Yeah. Okay, so I actually have some questions around that, though, because I've recently started trying to group the stuff that I'm building into solutions to logically group them together. And I'm finding that they're just kind of seemingly randomly assigned to solutions when they're created, if I do it after the fact. And I was curious if anybody had any knowledge as to how exactly that works. I'm doing this after the fact, right? So what I did is I built out a Power App and something like 7 different flows that support that Power App and some of the libraries and lists around it. And after I built all of that, I learned, hey, you can build a solution to keep all that stuff together. And when I'm trying to go back and create a new solution to put those into, a lot of them are saying that they can't be moved because they're already a member of this other solution. And I'm not real sure how that happened or how to undo it. Anybody know anything about that?
Well, I kind of faced some issues like that, but just to add on, the other problem I had was I did the same thing. I started creating it independently and then put it into a solution. And it started saying that the permissions of certain connections also changed. Once I put it into a solution, I have to now name every user who uses that flow or things like that, because I moved it from an independent flow into a solution flow, so that some of the connection properties also were changing. There were some things I faced. And the other thing was I was trying to transition now the whole entity to a new person. And I thought I can just share the solution and all the components would get shared to that person as a owner. But no, I still have to individually go to all 25 components and share them individually as a co-owner. So the solution is just a virtual box. It doesn't really have any other, it doesn't really help in managing or transferring ownership, I found out.
Okay.
So one thing that I've had some success with is if I have a flow in a solution, save as, and then it ends up in my flows. And then from the new solution, import it into the new solution.
Okay, so you're saving it out to a personal flow, and then from the personal, you can pull it back in.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I think that's a good way of doing it.
Okay. Yeah, because we're in a process. We're in the process right now of actually kind of upgrading our entire dev cycle and how we manage this stuff. It sounds like Akesh and you and I are in a very similar sort of frame of mind in looking at this stuff. So we're looking at implementing DevOps for our project management, and we're hoping to integrate that with doing some actual environmental builds and get some real honest to God code repository and version control running on these apps. But also being able to group the Power Apps and all of their supporting dependents together would be glorious, as opposed to the wild chaos that they are now.
So I got to ask you the obvious question. I know it was alluded to here before. When a person leaves the company, you just export the flow and then you re-import it as another user? Because I'm about to hit this, or I have hit it already in my environment. But then I ran into some kind of a difficulty. I forgot the exact details. But is that the procedure people take if the owner leaves? Export it, re-import it?
We're building ours with a service account, so that I don't have to worry about somebody leaving. So if I build it myself, then I make the connections and make the service account an owner.
Yeah, no, but I got users out there building these things, and like, oh, one of the users quit.
We don't allow our users. Yeah, we don't allow our users to do that.
Yeah. So Russell, I'll place a link in the chat window here. So using the admin interface, you can change the owner of a flow.
Oh, using the admin interface, you don't need to export it?
Right.
Correct. Yeah. The other thing that I've always done for that, to prevent that sort of safety net as well, is we'll create a team, or frequently there's already like an IT team. So depending on the client, it may or may not be appropriate to just assign it to the IT team, but you can assign Flow membership to teams, to groups, to Office 365 groups, and that prevents any of those from getting locked out like that.
Hey, have you done that? I haven't. I tried to do that. I looked into it, and I didn't think it was done. And then Dimitri's thing, the post that Dimitri just pointed at, I did try that, but that sets there's two things in Flow, in the database, in the Dataverse database behind the scenes. You've got the Flow owner and additional Flow owners, two distinct columns. Mm-hmm. And I think that the thing that Dimitri was pointing to, that link he posted, was to update the additional Flow owners. but the original owner column in Dataverse for that flow, and I believe all the connections are still tied to the original person who has left the company. And the only way I've found to do this is to export the whole thing and re-import it under my ID and reset all the connections.
That's so.
And we've been able to go in and update all of our data connections to the service account. So if the developer forgets and does it under his own name, then he's got to go and convert everything over to the service account, and then it comes under shared with me.
And so to convert it to the service account, he exports and re-imports and all that garbage.
Nope. Just, he does all the connections. You got to go in.
So he just gets added as
a service account.
Adds a service account as an additional owner and then resets all the connections and you're done?
That's all the connections. Yeah, and then we're done. That's how it works for us.
Oh, cool. Thank you so much for that. You saved me days and days of grief.
But again, we try to use the service account to actually generate both our power apps and our power automates.
Yeah.
We're using contractors.
While power service accounts are definitely a great way to go, it's actually a very good practice. But keep in mind when it comes to these service accounts, they will need to have licenses assigned to them for each of the services that they need to touch in that particular flow.
Yep, and that's where we spend our money on Power Automate licensing is on the service account. Yep. And right now I'm trying to figure out my strategy for doing SharePoint syntax like.
And then
Microsoft's requirement for all these extra licenses has made the practice of using service accounts much more difficult and cumbersome.
I know.
So it is a great.
All this process, I'm going to insert the G word, and the G word is governance. And if having governance implemented in terms of when people shift in and out, especially that are owners of any sort of flows or power apps or anything like that, that's documented. So then that way, because there's usually a window before they leave, and if that's notified, then you could even trigger that as of a flow or even a task. And then you could update it appropriately. But of course, hindsight's 20/20. But it goes back to the proper preparation.
Yep.
So if I use service accounts for all my flows, I mean, there's per user limits as to how many actions, how many times a specific user can call SharePoint from a flow per hour. How does that work with a service account? If all my flows,
we have the paid account. We purchased a Power Automate license for the service account. And we're a small company, like 100 and something people, so we're not hitting those limits. But what we've done is we pay the money for that service account.
Oh, is that just a premium? If I have a premium account, I don't hit those limits once I've got the premium account?
Yeah, either you don't have limits or it's much higher.
Okay, cool. That's good to know. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's what I said. That's what I'm thinking about with SharePoint syntax. I just put in a request to buy 2 licenses. One is going to get assigned to me, and one will be assigned to the service account. So we'll develop the contents out of the service account, and then I'll be able to test it using my license to actually go in and start to train the content type.
And then you've just blocked flows. You set that setting on all the SharePoint lists to disallow user flows.
People's accounts do not have Power Automate or Power Apps enabled, so they can't build.
Ouch! My people would complain.
Not ouch. They never knew about
no, good for me, but they'd be complaining.
Well, they just never know. This organization never knew about it. To be honest with you, they aren't really interested in doing it themselves.
So. No, you're in a good place. Wish I were there.
Deb, I'm going to put something in the chat window here too. So Microsoft has recently revised their SharePoint syntax licenses. So previously, anybody that benefited from syntax needed to be licensed. So you might have a SharePoint site that you have 100 people that are viewers, and let's say it's 3 people that are uploading files and 1 or 2 people training the model. And in that scenario, all 105 people would need a Syntax license. But they recently made a change where if you're not uploading content and if you're not training the model, you don't need a license. So now those 100 people that were just viewing the information do not need to be licensed, but those that are uploading the content or doing the models or trainers will need a license. So that should hopefully lower the bar.
And that change is enabling me now to start to look at Syntax. I'm going to do a proof of concept for reading credit card invoices. I'm going to do packing slips next, and then by the fall we'll start to dig into the big project, which is reading contracts and pulling metadata out of contracts. So I think total in my organization I'll need 10 people licensed. So it won't be too bad.
Nice.
It's $5 per person per month if you buy the yearly license, so it's $60 a year per person. $600 for 10 people. It's reasonable.
So, Mike, something for you. I really like the idea of using a service account for being a Flow owner, and it's great if you can do it. The earlier idea was discussed of using a SharePoint group, or
Yeah.
not necessarily a SharePoint group, but a distribution group. To grant permissions to a Flow.
No,
And
it has to be a security group, not just a distribution list.
Yes. I found this out to my great surprise. And about 6 months ago, when we had one of these open mic sessions, Dimitri explained it all to me.
Okay. Great. Yeah, so with one of my clients, we created a team just to kind of act as a back end for it. It was actually really amusing because they asked me what we should name it, and I was like, I don't care what we name it. We can call it the Nerd Collective for all I care. And one of the people liked that so much. Before I knew it, I got an invite to the Nerd Collective. So we have a team in that tenant called the Nerd Collective. And our governance policy, to Chrissy's point, for that tenant is any flow that is put into production gets shared with the Nerd Collective. We also set up a system where anytime we have any feedbacks or anything that reports to other people, we created a channel in there called Feedback. And any adaptive cards that we were posting out to people, they get posted into that central feedback as well. So that way we had kind of a backup copy of those things. And that helped dramatically with diagnostics and just figuring out how stuff was running. So kind of a back end system to kind of check on and to act as a security blanket. Very helpful.
We have less than 20 minutes left. What other questions do we have, Mike?
I believe we are nearing the end of the questions. But let me see. Oh, we got another one from Anonymous. What's the best way to get Teams to ring on my 2005 Motorola Razr phone?
Probably call forwarding.
Buy a new phone?
Yeah, new phone was going to be the top of my list.
Call forwarding should probably work.
I can't believe a 2005 phone is still working. Usually they have planned obsolescence at about 3 years and they just die.
Yeah, Motorola Razrs actually were really awesome. I had one of those.
They were awesome.
Way back in the day. I had the previous version of that. What was that? Oh, I had the StarTAC. That's what I'm thinking of. Which was
Can
like,
we talk about the question I emailed you yesterday about the managed metadata?
yeah, sure. Hang on. Yes, we can get to that, but let's cover this one a little bit first. So when you talk about ringing on there, there's a question of what type of, I miss my Windows Phone too. What type of ring are you referring to? Because what Dimitri was just mentioning is if you have a PSTN license, which they don't call it that anymore, but if you have a dial-up license and there's an actual phone number associated with your phone, then you can literally just forward that phone number to your regular cell phone's phone number, just like you would any other phone to phone. But I'm guessing you may mean the soft ring, which is if you don't have that license and people are calling you direct on Teams. I have experienced problems on my Galaxy with Teams not coming up and not posting notifications for me. And I actually had it with my previous phone too, which was a Pixel. So now I think Samsung recently pushed out an update, or maybe Microsoft pushed out an update. I don't know what, but within about a month or two ago, it just all of a sudden started working. And now I get lots of Teams notifications on my phone. So unfortunately, I'm not real sure if that's the problem that you're talking about, then I'm not real sure if there's anything that you can do about it. But I'd be really interested to hear other people mention this. Has anybody else had problems with Teams not notifying them of calls on their mobile device?
On my phone. Mine rings on my phone, but it doesn't ring on my laptop. That's just bizarre. But that's what happens to me.
Yeah. Okay.
And I have an LG phone that I used to work.
Interesting.
To help with the person that posted the question, I posted the screenshot of the settings for your Teams. So based on your profile, if you go into your settings menu, you know that ellipsis, and for those that can't remember what an ellipsis is, it's the 3 dots. You click on that, you do on the ellipsis, and you select the cause option, and you'll see the option where you can enable where it rings on. Or I think Dimitri mentioned you can also forward it too as well, and it ring. And so far, I haven't had an issue, and also my husband hasn't had an issue. But we have Galaxy Notes. I have the Note 10 Plus, so it's a little bit more of a recent version than the Razr. And Yap has like the Note 9 and Note 8, so even still more recent than the Razr. But so, yeah. But I put the screenshot of the settings menu in there. But I blurred out my number that because I haven't had an issue. It does ring on my phone, but yeah.
Cool. Thanks, Chrissy.
Thank you, Chrissy. Brings me.
Oh, but full disclosure, I do have the domestic international calling plan tied to my Teams.
Yeah.
So not everyone may have that calls option.
Is that setting available for people who don't have the PSTN license?
That's a good question, Mike. I guess I could check it with my personal, because I have Teams.
I have a client account.
Microsoft account.
That.
So.
I have an account I can check that on. Hang on.
Yeah, I could check, but I would have to log out here in order to go check it. So it'd be far faster.
I've got a profile for that. It is available on accounts that don't have PSTN.
Cool. Yay.
Oh, interesting. So the only thing you can forward it to is voicemail.
Hey, could I double back to a previous discussion? I was just
Please.
reading the article someone posted about changing flow owners. In my case, the flows are not part of a solution. And the article that was posted here says, yeah, you can only change the owner if it's part of a solution. Can someone confirm or deny? Is that true? Whoever was talking about changing flow owners
What do
previously?
you mean by a part of a solution?
It said it had to be packaged in a solution. I'm reading the
Oh.
article that was posted,
Oh.
and it said if it's part of a solution, you can change the flow owner, but if it's not, you
Nope.
can't.
Nope, these are just standard flows.
So you just
Yeah.
had some user creates a flow and you can change it. Okay, thank you so
And
much.
Russell, if it helps, I just posted a link, a Microsoft documentation that was just recently updated. 2 days ago.
614.
Change the
That's what
owner
I'm
of the
reading
cloud.
now.
Yep.
And if you look down in there, it says if the flow has to be part of a solution. But
I gotta tell you,
whatever.
it's been a while since we've tried to change an owner, so maybe they want us doing that. But in the past, we've been able to do that for the last, I don't know, 2.5, 3 years.
Yeah. The very first thing says on the left pane, click on solutions and find your flow. It's not in the solution, but I'll dig into it. Thank you so much for your help with this. I appreciate it.
And Russell, there was also the PowerShell method in the other article that I posted.
Okay, I missed that one. Can you?
Sure, I could repaste that.
Thanks. I appreciate it. Got it. Thank you so much.
Also, Russell, if all else fails, remember the Microsoft community is big. So if you're on Twitter, feel
Yeah.
free to, like tweet out your dilemma and especially tag some like key Power Automate peeps, or even just tag Microsoft Power Platform, and someone will bound to respond.
Yeah, I'm with you. And that Power Users site, I use that. That thing's great. The powerusers.microsoft.com. They always have answers.
Or even on the documentation of whether it's the one that Dimitri shared or the one that I shared, at the bottom of the page, there's the one about feedback. If you click on that, you could actually interact with that, because remember, Microsoft is no longer really using user voice because that was a third-party app.
Well, there's a new
lot of that
preview replacement.
community interaction is being brought in-house. So, and the feedback mechanism is really good.
Thank you, Christine.
I miss user voice.
I miss user voice too.
But I know there's a replacement coming out. I have a link to it on my home computer.
Yeah.
Well, the
That's
replacement is in-house. Microsoft is not
Yeah.
using a third party.
They were talking about bringing that in-house. So it just took
Yeah,
forever to do it.
Its
The
implementation
replacement is in Dynamics.
Its
Exactly.
implementation has been
Which is
chaos.
Power Platform. The replacement, it's already there with Dynamics, Power BI, Power Apps, Power Automate, virtual agents, everything under the Power Platform umbrella. And then eventually all the other apps are being incorporated. In the meantime, there is the tech community too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, and I forgot, I got something else to submit on the form that's excited. It's one of those little things that I don't know if anyone that intended participate in Build like I did, or if you didn't, or maybe if you didn't, you may have seen it. Power Platform itself got a new logo.
Yep. Saw that. Well, not just a new logo, its own dedicated logo. The first time it's had its own logo. It was just using Power Apps logo before, right?
Right. Well, it was pretty much using, because there was Power BI, Power Automate, the virtual agents, everything else. But Power Platform itself, as the entity, did not have its own logo, and
Right.
now it does.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, the other thing I put in, and this might be more significant for any of the Mac users out there, not so much just the Mac users, but it would probably have more impact for the Mac users, or going back to Power BI, the Power BI data marts. That was the other thing announced at MS Build, because the power of the Power BI data mart is that it's pushing a lot more of the report building capability onto the Power BI service, the browser. Because there was only really just limited capability you could do with the browser. And as you know, Power BI desktop, there was no Mac equivalent so all those Mac users either had to run an emulator or whatever. I'm not a Mac user, so I'm not sure what they needed to do if they wanted to really develop and build a report, build a model, and everything like that. But now with data marts, they have a little bit more power now, and that's also something that's still in preview, obviously. Sorry. So, I tell you, there was like so many goodies announced at Build that it was like I'm still swimming.
I know we have just a few minutes left here. I think Deb had a question regarding taxonomy. Deb?
Oh, I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you. I'm driving. I just flipped out for that for a second. Yeah, so I've been messing around with my content type up, and I went and created a managed metadata column for departments. And then we actually tried to use it with the content type up in the content type up, and we got an error message that stated that it wasn't global. Trying to fix it, Mike was kind enough to give me some suggestions on how to fix it. However, we discovered that neither mine or my developers' admin accounts were, I believe we were called taxonomy admins. So it was upgraded right just before I left work today. So I'll play with this tomorrow. But it's sort of good to know that when you go to create your site columns in the content type level, you're actually creating it at the site column level, not actually at the content type hub level, which is just confusing the heck out of me why that would be.
Yeah, so it basically boils down to just keeping in mind that there are two tiers of the term store. You have a term store at the tenant level and a term store at the site collection level. So
the content type hub itself is a site collection. So
right.
That's where I'm confused.
Yes.
Back in the olden days, anything you created at that site collection was the content type hub. Now it looks like it's a magical part of the site collection.
So what I recommend to everybody, and this is one of the first things I do when I start working with a new client, is I actually modify I actually customize the heck out of the content type hub. The first thing I do is I name it, so it's not called Team Site. But then I just put things in the navigation link that bring me directly to the site contents and the site content types and the site columns. And then I'll add a link to there for the term store. And the link that I add there is not to the local term store, but to the tenant level term store. Now,
I thought I was there,
as Deb mentioned, you have to be a full-on taxonomy admin for that to work, or a global admin or a SharePoint administrator.
No, see, I'm a SharePoint admin. At least I thought I was, but then again, our MSP keeps changing my license, so I never know.
So if you're a SharePoint administrator, you should have inherited taxonomy admin by default, unless it's a very, very old tenant.
The tenant is from 2018.
Yeah, no, then for only 2018, that you should have inherited taxonomy admin. Right.
So the thing is that if you're not a taxonomy admin, but you're a SharePoint Online admin, you can add yourself as a taxonomy admin. So
Right.
if I share my screen here,
I'm definitely a SharePoint admin.
so if you go to more features,
Oh, that's right. You have
Yes.
to add yourself. You're right. You're right. You have to go in there and add yourself at first. Yeah.
Actually, they redid this interface. Oh yeah, so you would go into admins and you would add yourself here.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's one of those lists, by the way. Don't let that get too long. Keep that group nice and short.
All right, so we have a couple of minutes. Should we do
Thanks,
the raffle and close out?
So I've got a tip for you guys that I ran into today that I thought was very interesting. Let me share my screen real quick. Actually,
Unfortunately, I got to run. But good to see everyone. Great discussion.
Thank you.
We'll see you guys again next month.